Leader and MEP Nigel Farage. In the piece there, talking there, Mr Farage, about the fact that you don't like some of the concessions. Spell out for viewers, what is it about this process that you don't like?
£40 billion is a very good start. That seems way too much. That's the first thing. Second thing, continued jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. The whole point of Brexit is to run our own country through our own elected representatives and our own courts, so not very happy about that. And the concession on fishing, it's ludicrous. We should take back what is rightfully ours. Doesn't stop foreign boats fishing completely in our waters, but at the minute, we're giving away 60% of the fish in our waters to the foreign fleets. So they're the concessions. I also don't like the fact that it took 9 months to trigger Article 50, 2 years for Article 50, which was supposed to be the transition, and now another 21 months of transition on top of that. So many things I could complain about, but here's the important thing. 1 year from today, at 11 p.m. on the 29th of March 2019, we will leave the European treaties after a period of 46 years, and we will be an independent, free, self-governing nation. And that is a big day in this nation's history.
You acknowledge that those concessions, as you've described them, are an essential price to pay, in one sense, to get to March 2019 in that state, and for that reason you simply have to accept them.
I think what she's doing is she's making those concessions because she has to win that final vote in the House of Commons. Don't forget there was the big Supreme Court case with Gina Miller that said Parliament has to have the final say on whatever the deal is, and I feel she's making the concessions so that her own rebels and the Labour Party say, do you know what, we can't stand in the way of this. So I don't like the process.
You're saying she had no choice. You're accepting that.
Well, that's her view. I think if she'd been bolder, she'd have taken the country with her, and if you take the country with you, Parliament follows as well. But either way, one thing for certain, I felt today for the first time, when I listened to people talking about wanting a second referendum, they're beginning to look a bit ridiculous today, because the polling now is quite clear. 65 to 70% of people say to the government, just get on with it. We don't want another vote.
With the set of conditions that you've just outlined, does it mean that the UK is a vassal state, certainly for the transition period, as some Conservatives say?
No, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg is right about this. I think, we're in a position where we're a rule taker without any say whatsoever. It's not a good deal. But you know something? Once we're out, we're going to wake up on March the 30th next year saying, do you know what? We're a free country again. We can do whatever we like. So we could even change the terms of that deal.
In what sense?
In the sense that once you have a sovereign parliament, it can do what it wants. For the last 45 years, we've had a parliament constrained in so many ways by European law and by European courts. I think politics proper begins again in this country on March 30th next year.
But a deal involves two parties, possibly more parties. How can it change the terms of the deal if the other parties don't agree?
I tell you what, there are plenty of deals in life that get broken. That's just the way life is. As long as we leave, history's been made. We're a free nation. We can get back to arguing amongst ourselves, making our own decisions. I don't like transition, and I feel after we've left, there will be political challenges to some of those concessions.
So the EU shouldn't take us at our word when we sort this deal out, is what you're saying?
Well, it can take Theresa May as Prime Minister at her word, but, once we've left the European Union, she's kind of done the job that she was put in place as Prime Minister to do.
Parliament itself and the role it has. We have Tony Blair today. I know you're not his biggest fan, but we have Tony Blair today saying, as a former Prime Minister, look, it makes sense to see what this final deal is. It may be very different to that which was, foreseen a year ago, 18 months ago. Yeah. Even you're saying that, the nature of the deal is not what you wanted.
Yep.
Does not make more sense to give Parliament a meaningful vote on that final deal?
Parliament is going to get a meaningful vote on that final deal, and if Parliament rejects that final deal, we're then headed towards either a general election or a referendum, and that is what Tony Blair is doing. Tony Blair is speaking not just to the Labour Party, but to the Ken Clarks and Anna Soubry's sitting on the Tory backbenches. But here's the rub. There are 4.5 million people who voted Brexit and then voted for Jeremy Corbyn at the last general election. He knows they're pretty firm Brexiteers, those Midlands, South Wales and Northern seats. And if Corbyn was to do anything that was seen to extend Article 50 or push for a second referendum, Corbyn knows it would cost him the next election. So I understand what Tony Blair's trying to do. I just kind of think the ship has sailed. I think the prospects now of the Prime Minister being defeated and a second referendum look very limited indeed.
If the final deal is very difficult to get into place, is there a prospect that transition, this Article 50 period, the transition itself, could be rather longer than people had predicted?
Well, that's the problem, and that's one of the reasons I didn't want a transition deal. You know, we didn't vote for it in the referendum. We accepted Article 50 in a 2-year period. And the worry is, as you say, that we get towards the end of 21 months, and then it rolls into perhaps the next general election, and goodness knows how long it goes on for. And what most of us want is, most of us that voted Leave certainly want, the government to grasp the nettle, get on with it. Yeah, sure, there'll be one or two choppy waters, one or two changes, but let's get on with it and do it.
Mr Farage, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Let me go back to Nigel Farage in Brussels. Nigel Farage, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Second time lucky. So my question to you was, it looks like we're talking about 40 billion plus in pounds or euros. It's going to be over a long period of time. It's going to meet some of our ongoing obligations even after we leave. Isn't that a sum worth paying to reach the end game you've always wanted, which is to get out?
Well, the first thing to say is we voted to leave and we want a clean break, not a relationship that could go on for possibly decades, certainly in the case of pensions. And secondly, even if we'd been offered tariff-free access to the single market in return, which at this stage we haven't, but even if we had been offered that, it is not worth nearly 50 billion sterling. No deal is better than a bad deal, and this is a very bad deal indeed.
But how do you know that, since most business is terrified at the idea of no deal, of crashing out? Well, they would rather have a deal.
Look, there are lots of different voices of business, and yes, I understand the big corporates, always defend the European Union structure, but I'm reminded they were the same people that thought joining the euro was a good idea.
They're also the people that provide most of our exports, and they're worried that if we crash out, to use the terminology, that it will harm their ability to export. That's legitimate, is it not?
Look,
doing this will avoid that.
Do you know something? With no deal, and with tariffs being put on British manufacturers, the movement of sterling against the euro every month is bigger than the percentage we'd pay in tariffs. And just look at the amount of business America does, China does with the European Union on World Trade Organization rules. The other big thing here is we keep obsessing about our trade relationship with Europe. Look, 85% of the global economy is outside the Eurozone, and another reason for a very, very clean, quick break is to start opening ourselves up to other trade deals.
Of course. 45% of our exports go to the EU. How much of America's exports go to the EU?
Yeah, these are smaller amounts, but hey, these are growing markets.
How much smaller?
It's still $300 billion
how much
worth
smaller, Nigel Farage?
$300 billion worth every single year the Americans sell into the European single market without having a trade deal of any kind whatsoever.
It's about $1 in 10, whereas for us it's almost 1 in 2. It's much more important, isn't it, to us?
Well, I tell you what, you could look at this the other way around and say that 80% of the entire British economy is not involved in overseas trade of any kind at all. And yet, if we sign up to a transition deal, we're still going to be bound by the rules for the single market. There are lots of advantages to breaking out of this.
OK, well, just finally, what's happened? None of your Tory Eurosceptic friends are saying anything like this. They seem, by and large, to be content to go along with it. Well, why is that?
Well, they've got their big chance. In a few minutes, it's Prime Minister's questions, and I'm hoping somebody on the backbenches stands up and says, we did not vote to pay more money to the European Union. We voted to stop paying money, and that this number is unacceptable to the British public. They've got their chance.
All right. Well, we've already heard from some Eurosceptics, like Ian Duncan-Smith, who seem reasonably content, but I'm not one to put people off watching PMQs, so no doubt our viewers will follow your rallying cry. Nigel Farage, thank you very much for joining us.